We saw in Part 4 how a raging gun battle in the open left both sides bruised, their hopes of easy victory gone like New Zealand's supply of virgin wool. The Kelly Gang's plan for a terrible victory over the hated police has failed like some corporate rebranding strategy, with only one police wounded to show for their mammoth come-down. But the gravely wounded Superintendent Hare, the Queensland Sub-Inspector O'Connor, and the Victorian Senior Constable Kelly, no relation, all understand this much. They must cordon off the pub now, before the gang can escape. And that's just what they do, despite their lamentable numbers relative to the task. Police numbers, 14 men, are too low to cordon off the hotel efficiently, and reinforcement is imperative. Indeed, Ned Kelly got through at this juncture. And soon enough, Kelly and Arthur find unsettling proofs that the gang, or some part of it, has made good their escape before the police cordon could stretch out this far. Constable Bracken is sent galloping to Wangaratta to get reinforcements, which will deplete each man's share of the reward riches, but also be the building block of victory. Ned has a most telling argument with Joe Byrne. He and Joe have a furtive chat in the dark, overheard by the police, playing blame game about the armour, and determining not to dismay and frighten the lesser members by displaying clearly how shot up their two leaders are. This is a mug's game, because Joe will have to crawl around in their midst after all now. Yet what good would it do the gang to escape anyway? The gang have been shot up just enough to make escape impossible. Two men are no longer capable of riding a horse, and will trail enough blood to be merely entry-level work for a black tracker, of whom there are fucking 5 right in front of them now, bent on vengeance, for this time it's personal. The gang just tried to murder them. Ned tries it anyway. He tries to mount a horse. Christ knows how he was able to hold the Colt revolving rifle and lift the groin flap. Well, he wasn't able, come to think of it. Yet somehow he did climb over a fence in this tatterdemalion state. Or did he? Join me in a deep dive into just how the hell he got out of the rat trap and into death row. And it will benefit from my recent pilgrimage to the site. A few seconds of my life I can't get back. Yeah. And the very large man in a hat, it's got to be Sergeant Steele, because he actually was that big, to judge by his balls anyway. We're talking about a bullet through the right foot, left elbow shattered, 97 pounds of non-articulated iron, while holding up that ponderous groin flap, and carrying a Colt revolving rifle with no sling. All this with one hand. An exercise firmly stamped, do not attempt unless Ned fucking Kelly. On that note of his Colt carbine having no sling, I am aware that Aidan Fallon mentions a sling in his gorgeous historical novel Glenrowan, but the photographic record and the sketches by correspondents on the site on the day say otherwise. Another reason I'm having my doubts that he even tried to mount a horse is that you mount a horse from the left side. That means you put your left foot in the left stirrup. That means all of his weight and the armor's weight was on that gravely wounded right foot. He must have been very unsteady trying to stand on that. And then you have to hold the pommel of this saddle with your left hand. His left hand is a write-off. It just wouldn't work at all. And he really would know that, being an expert horseman. And unlike this man with his shotgun here, Ned can't benefit from wearing a sling to keep his arms free, or wearing the gun on a carabiner. That's how these things got their names, from wearing carbines on them. And for the same reasons, I really doubt he could have climbed a fence either. In the Royal Commission that embroiled the police the next year, there were snide remarks made, especially by Constable Phillips, about the Queenslanders' conduct at the battle. But it can be pretty difficult to figure out just what the Queenslanders were up to. Let's use this sketch by the Queensland Commander O'Connor and this photo from 1932 by kind permission of Who Gives a Fuck, their public domain. The Queenslanders were snickered at for jumping into a drain and staying there, but it eliminated friendly fire worries. It pinned down the outlaws over a wide front of possible escape routes, and, to change the subject a little, O'Connor might well be trusted to know and show that there was a huge gap in the fence line. I have damn nearly been driven sane by going through every one of the photos, contemporary or in the years just after, tracing out those fence lines, trying to prove him wrong. No, there is that big gap. At least it cannot be contested with the evidence. Sometimes that western fence is obscured by the house, like you see here. It might be obscured by smoke. It might be obscured by trees, or the chimney, like here, completely blocking our view up that fence line. I think the closest I can come is this collection of go-either-way shadows over here, but like I said, they go either way. Pareidolia has by now become my constant companion. Damn it. Vague individual shadows could be the fence running towards the south, or they could be running towards the east. In any case, all that proved that O'Connor was wrong to show that fence there this far out from the line of the western side of the house. The chimney you see there, blocking our view completely from this angle, proves that he was wrong to put it there. For if he had been right, it would have looked just like this blue fence I have fictitiously added here, wouldn't it? And should have put it more like this. I grant you, it's as not to scale as mud maps get, to be sure, but what about this section of fence? That's the kicker. I love the way Monty Wedd appeared to follow O'Connor's sketch while chickening out with this conveniently placed smoke plume to hide whether that fence goes all the way to the building or not. And if it didn't, then what in hell was the point of having this slip rail here, shown in yellow? Given that any horse could just waltz straight out. Which brings us to this little building here, variously described in testimony as an outhouse, or as an external detached kitchen, as if this kitchen here wasn't perfectly sufficient already. Hey, we're a classy establishment. We will prepare your lobster thermidor in an altogether better grade of thunderbox for you. But why would a toilet or a kitchen need doors so goddamn huge that the baddies in a Schwarzenegger flick could successfully land a hit on them? I suggest it was a combined stable and toilet. Otherwise, what shelter did the horses have? And what toilet facilities did the Best Accommodation and Jones Inn have? Toilets? Where's that fucking tactical breakdown? Alright, I'll show relevance. It's all about determining the route of Ned Kelly's escape. And to breathe life into it, once again, from the range of unsatisfactory options, I choose Monty Wedd, because he knew a thing or two about armour. No, I don't mean that clunky crap there. No, I mean the real thing. His personal Type 95 Japanese World War II Hargo tank that you can now see after it's been donated to the Cairns Armour Museum.
And the joke's on you.
So did he go this way, which would be a lot easier if he was outside the fence line all along, and plod his agonizing way across open space to cover up there at the top right, leaving blood footprints that fortunately didn't betray him due to the darkness, just as the police were starting to spread out in that direction. There were sightings. Indeed, his travel agent back to reality, Gascoigne, claimed at this point to have been surprised by a man acting very suspiciously. So, if that gap was there, then Ned wouldn't need to make much noise, but would be most likely seen by the police as they fanned out. If that gap was not there, then Ned had to clamber over a fence whichever way he went. Or did he go this way, with at least questionable cover for his movements, and through the horse paddock? Let's look briefly at why Ned couldn't really flee up that western route. Starting with the opening carnage, there's the gang out in the open, orange. Here in blue is the police, ambushed in the bottleneck in the dark. After the bloodbath, you see the police dispersing to cover and the gang retreating into the pub. Except the shell-shocked Ned. He stays out. Stage one of the traps fanning out, none of them towards the east, you notice. Remember, this photo is 52 years later. There was plenty more cover here back in the battle. See how Superintendent Hare has returned to the fray, both commanders bleeding from a severe arm wound, and baffled by the fence. He can't climb it with just one usable hand. Observe the navy blue arrow. It's the direction of police fanning out. View from 1880 on the ground of that. But Constable Arthur and Senior Constable Kelly thrust ahead of the rest. Shots are then fired from the breezeway, and are about as effective as delegating someone else to take a piss for you. Here is what the deputized farmer Charles Rawlins was doing, carrying ammo to the men around the field. Now a sally by Ned Kelly. He fires into the onrushing tide, but Kearney and the black tracker Barney fire on him, and he retreats again. Given his sleeplessness, drunkenness, and profuse bleeding, he just can't cope with a fluid situation. So, they tell us that this is where the Queensland black trackers were set up in the ditch. All these spoiling attacks by the Kelly gang were just so much pissing in the wind. Their real objective should have been kill every one of the police any way you can. And, well, because that's so difficult, I might recommend finding a bullet hole in the wall, taking your helmet off so you can aim properly, and aiming a rifle out and trying to shoot the police one by one. And just when the return fire comes, just take it. Take advantage of the fact the police are cut off from communication with the outside world now. 3 members of the Kelly gang died there, and some hostages were mortally wounded. Unbe-fucking-lievable. Those were the police lines. Were. Who is responsible for this atrocity? As the gang's spoiling attacks fail and they withdraw, the fanning out continues, and Hare accepts at last he is in imminent peril of bleeding to death, and staggers back to the train to Benalla. He must have looked like guts personified going back into the battle while hemorrhaging blood. But now it's time to rush to Benalla and seek real medical treatment. He will get the lion's share of the Kelly reward riches, however. As Hare gives up his ballsy attempts to keep fighting and gives the order to surround the hotel. So you see in the blue arrow, Hare heading back to the train station, and towards the top of the screen, Arthur and Kelly continuing their intrepid skirting around of the battlefield. So, do you really think Ned could have escaped up this avenue at such a time? He probably tried it. Or maybe Gascoigne didn't know which outlaw was trying to pull the wool over his eyes at that point, only to spin around and try his luck the other way. I mean, just look at it. I sure wish I could figure out just where was that horse he's trying to mount, seen here in Carrington's sketch, and in the photo of Constable Arthur holding Joe Burns' horse after the victory. Some writers tell you the horse was 100 yards from the pub, and therefore outside the pub's property fence. Some have it inside, and I reckon that's where it would have been.
And it's believed that he attempted to saddle his horse, or specifically Joe's horse, Music. She got spooked by the gunfire and bolted, and it would have been out in this direction where she did that, and Ned followed suit.
Ned was free to make his own rules, and he would have left the slip rail down. He's a hostage taker. He doesn't have to do what his host wants. Now, he, and possibly also Joe Byrne, had just been scouting on horseback down to the railway track to see what was going on just before the battle, and had come back probably very pissed off. Animated debate will rage at the Royal Commission next year into whether he was bequeathing command to the Queensland Commander or to Senior Constable Kelly of Victoria. But all men were essentially vindicated in that inquiry. Now it goes from opposing commanders who are both bleeding fearfully from a wounded left arm to both commanders being named Kelly. Let's return to Constable Bracken. He would have needed about 20 to 30 minutes to gallop a horse to Wangaratta for reinforcements, and during that time, Superintendent Hare took the train away urgently to Benalla. In Benalla, he arranged a telegram to be sent to Wangaratta telling them about the gunfight, although in point of fact, it could be heard from Wangaratta. Indeed, the living legend Sergeant Steele had already walked a long way up the railway track, listening in on the battle. The Wangaratta Police Barracks houses a handful of constables. Awaken, gentlemen, you are required at Glenrowan to watch me kill Ned Kelly. I can't ride a horse, Sergeant. I've got morning wood, you know. That was one costly stiffy. Hey, I saw that. Stop that blinking. That takes 1/10 of a second. That's an additional 1/10 of a second of life you have afforded Edward Kelly. They scrambled to Glenrowan to the sound of the guns, and Sergeant Steele remembered his long-standing vow to be there at Ned Kelly's last moment. Back at Glenrowan, Arthur and Kelly continue their circuit around the pub and down to the eastern end. At some point in that circuit, they chanced upon Ned Kelly's missing rifle and skullcap. Much as I would like to say this pinpoints the route of Ned's escape, sadly both men's testimony at the Royal Commission just made it too vague where it was. So, it's time to draw conclusions. The big clues for me are in the fact that the horse got out too, yet it could not have jumped the fence, or that would happen to every guest's horse there. And the other big clue is that Ned, and likely also Joe, had gone scouting down to the railway before, and couldn't possibly have wasted any time putting the slip rail back up when they returned in that ponderous full armour. We don't know where the slip rails were, or whether you transited through the outhouse. Therefore, I conclude that Ned merely staggered out through a gap he had earlier left in the fence. No superhuman feats of climbing needed here. So, with Ned, breaking out after 2 attempted sallies solo, with Sergeant Steele claiming a Dan breakout attempt in the dark, and Gascoigne meeting one of them too, the real possibility exists that the gang had broken up in panic. Now, let me explain why I've been mainlining on all these boring fences and detached outhouses and kitchens and so on. It's because I have my own theory about what happened when Ned and Joe came back from scouting. See the break in the fence up there? That's just speculative. We don't know where it was, but Ned and Joe's horses. Now, here is that outhouse. Our friends come back. There's Ned and Joe come back, and, well, they really want to get into the pub in a hurry to their hostages, and they need a plan B. It's gone awry. The police are all alive, and they're arriving in Glenrowan. So they go into the outhouse, but we might change to a different scale for this. So they go into the outhouse. Note the arrangement of the fences around it. My theory is that its interior consists of a toilet, see the thunderbox in there, sectioned off from a stable. You see, it works in to the paddock like that. Ned and Joe walk in here. Ned and Joe walk in here. And once they're in there, they're in a very stinky environment indeed. It's got manure and it's got human waste, because anyone who's ever smelled an Australian thunderbox would need no introduction to what an unfriendly world it is. So I think Ned came out one of these doors. Remember how I found it startling that it has 2 large doors. Then he and Joe say, "Oi, what's that noise? There's someone in there, isn't there?" And open it up and find Martin Cherry. Ned is beside himself with frustration at his derailment scheme being derailed, and he says something like, "You're waiting here to tip off the traps about us, aren't you? Oh, I don't like that." Joe probably says, "Oh, for God's sake, don't have the doors open." And Ned goes in, closes the doors. Blam! Folks, we now have a scenario that aligns with the fact that Cherry was found in a faraway building, and with the fact that the reporter, McWhirter, reported hearing a shot at this point. The others didn't. It would have been muffled if he shut those stable doors on it, after all. Now, you might object, hey, he was in the toilet when the battle started and he got shot by police fire. No, that does not account for the fact that the hostages in the pub knew he had been shot. That means witnesses spread the story to them, and that means Ned and Joe spread the story to them. And comes out having just mortally wounded 58-year-old Martin Cherry, who we see lying in there now, sentencing him to die a truly miserable and frightful death. Then, at some point, the horses, or at least one of them, gets out. When the time comes for Ned to escape, he goes back in, obviously into the stable half of it, and through to where one of the horses will have escaped out of that missing slip rail over there. And out he goes, probably stopping to sneer at Martin Sherry on the way. So, folks, that is my hypothesis for how Martin Sherry came to be found in that outhouse. And I accuse Ned Kelly or Joe Byrne of being the murderer. If only the autopsy had identified the bullet in Martin Sherry's body, it would make this so much easier. But other people were trying to get out too, the hostages, and the gang appeared to have exploited this to mask their own attempts to escape in the midst of the hostages. In these pathetic scenes, reputations were made, reputations were sullied, but at last the police started to get a clear picture of what a hostage crisis was at hand. For example, early in the shootout, when the Kellys were still making lone probing attacks and hostages still desperately trying to scurry away, the Queensland Commander O'Connor gave the order to start aiming high, to shoot above chest height, so as not to shoot hostages now known to be in there. Another motivation for the fire high order was the rumours that the gang were hiding in the rafters of the building. But, sadly, the first escaped hostages to bring intel to the police, Constable Bracken and Neil McHugh, failed to specify that they were talking about civilians when they said there were so many in there in armour. Yet, bizarrely, no matter how much individuals are maligned or blamed for their inability to stop the hostage shootings, no one ever seems to blame the gang, who never said one word about having hostages while deliberately attracting fire into them, and never once gave a floppy fuck about the welfare of their wounded. Senior Constable Kelly and James Arthur complete their wide flanking movement and settle down on the east side of the hotel. At last that side is guarded, but only precariously. Indeed, Constable Arthur had to keep well back from the pub, fearing that his powerful Martini Henry rifle would punch right through it and hit police on the other side of the pub with those daunting, man-stopping bullets. About a year later, Arthur started claiming that he saw 2 skyrockets go off overhead during these hours of darkness, bringing the number of people who sighted it up to, just him. This episode has gone on to become a truly tedious interruption in the Kelly movies, but no one else ever saw it, and why the fuck wouldn't they if it was really happening? Once again, we have David Dufty to thank for putting a bullet through the whole rotten edifice of these silly fantasies and revealing that it was surely sparks coming off one of the overheated locomotives. A real-life phenomenon, and that particular Kelly fantasy now nestles in besides the other debunked Kelly fantasies that came before it. Oh yeah, don't hold your breath waiting for me to tell you about the 150 armed supporters milling around on the fringes, waiting to swoop on the police like a wolf on the foal. No serious scholar still believes in that fecal matter, just the ones with such is life tattoos. The legend of the sympathizer army and of the treason plot have been recently debunked to the 10th decimal place. There is nothing left to believe in whatsoever. Find this wonderful work of rigorous scholarship on the net, on this site, for free, and see for yourself. But one man who had a Martini Henry didn't have to worry about friendly fire. The Queenslanders were well placed to blaze away with impunity because at no stage did the police cordon ever run to closing off this area up here. They weren't suicidal. And besides that, the cover was, well, too far away. The police fire is not a torrent of hot lead, because many of them have only shotguns or pistols. Shotguns can't penetrate the walls to any useful extent, and pistols, well, you'd be flat out shooting the thing straight with all the hand tremor you'd have. For to land a hit on someone with a pistol, you really have to be holding it in two hands, forget the movies, and hand tremor, breathing, and heartbeat. You have to master all of these. Try doing that when you're as cold as a witch's tit. Even so, the journalist John McWhirter testified later, the police fired about 3 shots for every shot fired by the outlaws. Just when the gang should have been trying to kill every one of this isolated dozen or so police, they were totally fumbling the ball instead. They were probably in an agony of indecision over how badly their fantasies of the armor's performance had failed in the reality of its new forge, actual combat, and the disappearance of Ned.
Where the hell's Ned?
Many police reported hearing them calling out for Ned into the still night air, something which suggests to me that they were now so incontinent with panic that they were past caring that their enemies learned the fact. Momentarily they scored one promising success. They succeeded in shooting one of the Queensland black trackers in the head. His name was Jimmy. Please note I have modified this photo to make their faces clearer. Any elation they felt over this would have been quickly confounded by Jimmy going berserk, charging out of the trench and firing away rapidly, screaming, "Take that, Ned Kelly!" much to the amusement of his commanding officer. How metal is that, I ask you? And it didn't stop him staying at post and fighting the remaining 11 hours. The shooting of Jimmy happened before 5 o'clock to distill separate testimonies, but there was a tradition of another man being wounded on the police side, and there's no telling when he was wounded. He didn't even talk about it himself, if indeed it did happen. His name was Charles Rawlins. And here you see a photo that he's not in. I doubt that it was a simple confusion of this ugly incident 2 weeks later. No, I think it was actually being discussed on the site at the time, as this Bendigo Advertiser article proves. But they don't give any real detail, and they clumsily time it to 3:42 p.m. after the siege had been over for a long time. Indeed, timeline in the article you see is something of a lost cause. But
Look, I think Ned said we can negotiate.
Who the fuck are you? At last, the besieging force had some reinforcements, and after 2 hours of the gang failing to defeat and deter 14 men, now they faced an additional 7.
Who's that? Wongareth Police, Sergeant Steele.
That number includes 2 men, 2 foot constables, who had to travel by train, but their lives were saved from crashing into the gully by that same redoubtable Rawlins I mentioned before. And another man who couldn't stop covering himself in glory that day was accompanying the Wangaratta contingent. It was Constable Hugh Bracken, who was running on some sort of potent brew of adrenaline and sleeplessness and duty. Returning now to Sergeant Steele, at last the besieging force had gotten itself an undisputed officer in charge. For about 10 minutes. Most books slavishly repeat the myth that in the next few minutes he attempted to murder several women by directly shooting at them.
Halt! Throw up your hands!
It's women and children!
It's a woman! Fire it again, I'll put a bullet through you.
They relish repeating the detail that at the next year's Royal Commission there were 2 officers giving evidence. They were Arthur and Phillips, who said that Steele laughed, "I've shot Mother Jones in the tits." Yes, that's the same Constable Arthur who reckoned he saw fireworks that somehow no one else saw, and even had the nerve to claim that Phillips would back him up on sighting the fireworks, but he didn't. Now let's look at the realities that you have to overlook in order to buy this bullshit. For one, Mother Jones had left nearly 2 hours ago. Steele had been briefed. 2, both Arthur and Phillips had nothing to say about it for about a year, even though Arthur wrote a report that we still have. Thirdly, Mrs. Reardon's baby shawl had a bullet in it, whereas Sergeant Steele was using a shotgun loaded with birdshot, not bullets. Mrs. Jones herself testified that that bullet was already in the clothing inside the building. Fourthly, all the officers who were closer to Steele than Arthur was testified they heard no such words. And finally, in 1882, a separate inquiry was held into the conduct of Sergeant Steele at Glenrowan, in which he was fully exonerated, vindicated, and by a unanimous decision. And since I did promise a tactical breakdown, then allow me to point out that the long-running myth that Steele just fired into the building blind for no reason except the fun of it is easily dismissed. Shotguns don't pierce the wood. 10 minutes after Sergeant Steele took command, Superintendent Sadler turned up by train from Benalla and took command over everybody. That was a reinforcement of an additional 14 men, including, by the way, 2 Victoria-based black trackers. Already, numbers were piling up against the gang that the gang didn't have a snowball's chance in hell of coping with. But they were all still alive and well armed, and the real reckoning hadn't come yet.
Give it a break, Joe. You'll get yourself killed.
Why not?
The murderer Joe Byrne went to the bar and poured himself a drink, then he toasted the health of the gang. I love the mix of listlessness and consternation in their faces. Remember, these men absolutely need one another. That 1/4-inch thick iron groin flap made it difficult to put his foot up on the bar, so he lifted it, and bought a bullet. The bullet had severed his femoral artery, which will bring on a quick bleeding to death in 2 minutes, and he landed on a man who testified that he could hear the blood hosing out onto the floor in the eerie darkness. He stayed there until the bodies were discovered by the brave Father Gibney, and it's pleasing to note that he was dragged away dead by one of the men who he had tormented so ruthlessly in the Sherritt hut 2 days before. Here, in this dodgy 1970 waste of celluloid, it is presented as deliberately taking advantage of a target of opportunity. Not very likely. Even though the Queensland Black Trackers were closer to an elite combat unit than to mere trackers, and were crack shots, I doubt that there was any light at all inside the building. It was the wee hours of the morning, the gang had ordered the lights extinguished, and Joe was well indoors. One witness testifying at the Royal Commission referred to a bushfire behind the hotel. I guess he would be talking about a bonfire from the festivities earlier, left untended once the train arrived. Harking back to that Royal Commission that was held the next year, Constable Phillips seriously devalued his own opinion by A. saying the Queenslanders couldn't shoot anyone from where they were. Dude, they killed Joe Byrne. And B. saying they weren't in danger from the gang's fire, when in fact Tracker Jimmy got shot in the head while he was in the ditch. The reason I can say with such certainty that Joe Byrne was shot by one of the Queenslanders, red arcs of fire, is that they had the only real arcs of fire that could travel directly to him. All the men otherwise out there with the yellow paths of fire, they have to go through multiple walls with each bullet, supposing they even have bullets. Some of them have shotguns, remember? But Constable Kirkham of Victoria was in the trench with the Queenslanders at the far left end of it from the start, because he traditionally did a lot of liaison duties with the Queenslanders. O'Connor positions himself here, and the others are listed as boy, which was pretty normal to call them back then, but not all of them are in the trench, and all 5 of them are there, so it's a snapshot in time. Here is yet another ludicrously inaccurate portrayal of the siege lines, but it has residual value for showing the conditions the Queenslanders had to toil through, and how amazingly bad most of the sketches foisted on the public after the battle were. Hell yeah, let's go now. Oh shit, I forgot the fences are balls up too. Let's fix that too. So there we have it. Now to populate the trench. No, that's only fixed like my cat was fixed. I mean, check out this photo of 3 years later with a new building in place. Considering that the creek or drain or trench was here, then the pub should loom large in the men's view. So let's give a blown up version of that pub now. Yep. No, there is something still wrong about this, isn't there? That puny fence, I mean, look at this one. You can actually see men in the picture after the building started burning. Let's increase the size of that fence. Yeah, that will do. I now echo the Emperor Nero seeing his newly built golden house. Now at last I can begin to live like a human being. So, now you can see that the Queenslanders had to shoot through a fence, whose top rail could be damned annoying. Putting aside the sneering of the critics for a moment, it's noteworthy that the several men who had most of the combat experience in the besieging force judged it prudent to stay in a trench. And trenches were normal in real warfare well and truly by this date. And notice how crap the original picture turned out to be in every aspect. Why the fuck did I pick it? But then again, even being on the scene did not stop people showing Ned Kelly's helmet upside down sometimes. It was like a plague all over art at the time. God, here's two more of them yet. Likewise, we are fortunate to have this very useful sketch by Hatherell of the burned down Glenrowan Inn, yet he also did this crap here with this giant pointless fence running squarely through the railway territory, pointlessly dividing or giving away half of their territory to Mrs. Jones, no doubt to make her very happy, but trust only the photographic record when it comes to the Glenrowan terrain layout. The police did not know they had scored such a game-changing success. It took some hours more to learn that. And when it was all over, this is what they did with Joe Burns' body. They strung it up at the Benalla police station for press photography. He was found to be wearing a ring stripped off one of the policemen murdered at Stringybark Creek, making this exercise in psychopathic behaviour a two-way street. Morale is the will to win. The morale of Dan Kelly and the other one had been given a body blow by the loss forever of Ned's trusted Lieutenant Joe Byrne. And for all they knew, Ned might be dead out there somewhere too. But while hope remained, their morale still remained. Police morale was problematic too. All through the night battle, they had at least had the cover of darkness. Now they would be stripped of it with the very unsatisfactory cover they had. And they didn't know the gang had armour. They didn't know the gang couldn't aim properly, and many of them thought they were up against 30 armed men. It's 6:40 in Glenrowan on the 14th of July. It's 6:45 in Glenrowan. We've reached the end of episode 5, The Night Battle, and as we prepare for episode 6, Ned Kelly's Last Stand, let's look out in the direction of looking out of the pub, in the direction of the police and of Ned's soon-to-be approach. It's now 7:15, just the time of Ned Kelly's Last Stand. Let's have a look at the lighting conditions. No doubt that journalist could see him. I think that was the lesser marsupial something. And now, the bit after the credits. 'Tis Good Monday, the holiest feast day of the year for the primitive church of Saint Ned the Martyr. In the abandoned old church house they have renovated to the true faith. Peace be with you, my sympathizers. And also with you, top bloke. Well, it looks like the renos were all done. Hey, what? Hey, Doggett, how come you ain't improved them last two faggy windows yet, eh?
Well, we spent most of it on that holy relic.
Good Monday, July the 28th, is a big Cajun for me, 'cause I'm an erect dependent of Steve Hart.
We don't want none of them coppers here. Copper! Fuck the police.
He was in the holy gang!
How come I've never heard of him? Calling your bluff, bitch. It is traditional to put on a passion play.
Passion play. Robbo says I'm the best at that. He means we'll put on a special show for the boys.
Altered Boys. Altered Boys. The altar's back here.
Hey, Sheila's auxiliary, next time put the slits in the front of their helmets.
But we just did what they hysterical insultants said.
Oh, never mind. Hey, go get the holy water sprinklers now. And now for the responsorial psalm, eh? Hey, stop it with all them big $2 words. Best bloody man, our invincible president, born of blessed Alan Ever Bogan. We praise you, now and forever. Response?
I do, Kate.
Best bloody man, our mighty watchdog against Fitzpatrick and all his works. Response?
I do, Kate.
Best bloody man, boxing champion, the real winner of Glenrowan. Response?
I do, Kate.
Now let's take a break for a Holy Communion.